Thousands gathered, expecting tradition. What they witnessed instead was silence, tears, and a walk that felt heavier than any crown. When Prince William paused and Kate reached for him, the palace itself seemed to hold its breath, and no one forgot what followed.
On a quiet London morning, the gates of Kensington Palace opened, and something shifted in the air. It wasn't the sound of cameras or the weight of history. It was the silence. A silence so heavy that seasoned royal guards felt their throats tighten. As Prince William stepped forward and Kate followed, hand in hand, the crowd didn't cheer. They cried. Why did this single walk, just a few steps across a room, leave grown men in tears and veterans of royal duty shaken to their core? This wasn't ceremony. This was something far more human. If stories like this move you, stories that reveal the human heart behind the crown, take a moment to like this video. Subscribe for more powerful royal stories you won't hear anywhere else. And share this with someone who believes royalty isn't just about titles. It's about moments that change people forever. The morning didn't arrive loudly at Kensington Palace. It slipped in. A pale London light crept across the gravel courtyard, soft and uncertain, like it wasn't sure it belonged there yet. The palace, usually a place of routine precision, felt different. Guards noticed it first. They always did. There was no official memo explaining the feeling, no change in schedule, no dramatic announcement. And yet, something sat heavy in the air, pressing against the stone walls, as if the building itself remembered too much. Inside, boots echoed along corridors that had carried centuries of footsteps, kings, queens, whispers, and regrets. Royal guards stood at attention, faces disciplined, posture flawless. But behind those trained expressions, something human stirred. One guard, a veteran with more than 2 decades of service, adjusted his gloves twice without realizing it. Another cleared his throat, then stood perfectly still again. These were men trained to remain unmoved by history. Yet this morning, history felt personal. Why today? That question lingered everywhere. Behind the palace doors, Prince William stood quietly, hands loosely clasped, staring not at his reflection, but past it. He wasn't rehearsing lines or gestures. He didn't need to. His mind was somewhere else entirely. Kate was beside him, calm on the surface, steady in posture. Years of public life had taught her how to carry herself with grace. But grace, when you look closely, often hides strength under pressure. She reached for William's hand, not dramatically, not for the cameras. Just a small, grounding touch. The kind that says, I'm here. We are here. No words followed. None were needed. This wasn't about appearance. It was about meaning. Outside, the crowd had already begun to gather. Not the usual festive energy. No shouting, no waving flags wildly. People stood closer together than usual. Coats pulled tight, conversations low. Some held phones, but didn't raise them yet, as if instinct told them this wasn't a moment to rush. An elderly woman near the front clutched a small photograph. A young father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, whispering something in her ear. She nodded solemnly, as though she understood this was important, even if she couldn't explain why. What were they waiting for? Inside the palace, a quiet signal passed between staff. Doors would open soon, and that's when the guards felt it most. One officer, standing near the entrance hall, later described it as the pause before a storm, but without fear. Another said it felt like the seconds before a farewell you don't want to say out loud. Royal duty is built on predictability. Every movement timed, every position measured. But this morning didn't fit neatly into protocol. William took a breath. Not a deep one. Just enough. His thoughts weren't about crowds or headlines. They drifted backward to memories, expectations, and the weight of legacy that never really leaves you. He had grown up walking these halls, learning early that the crown isn't something you wear, it's something you carry. Kate glanced toward the door, then back at him. Her expression was composed, but her eyes held something softer. Resolve, yes, but also empathy. For him, for the people waiting outside, for the moment itself. She had always understood something crucial about royalty. People don't connect to perfection. They connect to sincerity. And sincerity can be felt before it's seen. A senior guard subtly shifted his stance. The signal had been given. The doors were about to open. But before they did, there was a moment, brief, fragile, almost invisible, where everything stood still. No footsteps, no murmurs. Just the hum of history holding its breath. William leaned slightly toward Kate. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Just enough for her to hear. Ready? She nodded once. Outside, the crowd quieted without instruction. Conversations faded. Even the city seemed to slow. Then movement. The heavy palace doors began to part. Light spilled inward, cutting across the polished floor like a line drawn between past and present. The guards straightened instinctively, shoulders squared, eyes forward. And yet, in that instant, discipline wavered, not in posture, but in feeling. Because as Prince William stepped forward, something unexpected happened. He didn't stride. He walked, not like a symbol, not like a future king, but like a man aware that every step mattered not because of power, but because of people. Kate followed at his side, perfectly aligned, her presence neither overshadowing nor retreating. She wasn't walking behind him. She wasn't leading ahead. She was walking with him. That detail did not go unnoticed. Added a guard near the threshold swallowed hard. He had escorted royalty countless times, but this felt different. This felt intimate, like witnessing something you weren't meant to see, yet were honored to be part of. As they crossed the room, the silence deepened. No applause yet, no cheers. Just emotion building, quietly, dangerously close to the surface. Why did this walk feel heavier than speeches? Why did it carry more weight than crowns or carriages? Because people weren't watching royalty in motion. They were watching unity. They were watching two people who had weathered public storms, private loss, relentless scrutiny, and still chose to stand side by side. Outside, tears began to fall before anyone realized they were crying. Inside, even the guards trained never to react felt their eyes burn. And this was only the beginning. The doors were fully open now, and Kensington Palace no longer felt like a boundary. It felt like a bridge. As Prince William and Kate stepped forward together, the space between inside and outside disappeared. The crowd stood only a short distance away, yet it felt as though something far deeper than physical space was being crossed. No one spoke. That silence, thick, deliberate, almost reverent, wasn't planned. It happened naturally, as if thousands of people had reached the same unspoken agreement. Don't interrupt this. The first step landed, then another. Gravel shifted softly beneath polished shoes. Cameras lifted slowly, cautiously, like hands raised in a place of worship. Even the shutters seemed quieter than usual. A young royal guard stationed near the entrance felt his chest tighten. He had been trained to scan faces, detect movement, remain alert. But his focus wavered, not from lack of discipline, but from something else entirely. Emotion. William's gaze moved across the crowd, not sweeping, not performative. He wasn't searching for faces. He was acknowledging them. Each look carried a quiet recognition, as if he understood why they had come. Kate mirrored him, her expression calm, yet openly warm. There was no practiced smile. Instead, there was presence. The kind that makes people feel seen without being singled out. And that's when it happened. Someone in the front row began to cry. It wasn't loud. Just a sharp inhale, followed by a hand pressed quickly to a mouth, as if to apologize for feeling too much. But emotion is contagious, especially when it's honest. A man beside her blinked rapidly, jaw clenched. Further back, someone wiped their face with the sleeve of their coat. No one laughed, No one judged, because everyone understood. This wasn't about spectacle. It was about release. William and Kate continued walking slowly, deliberately across the room, toward the open space where protocol said they should stop. But protocol felt secondary now. The moment had taken on a life of its own. A senior guard, positioned slightly to the side, noticed something extraordinary. Even the officers flanking the path had softened, not in stance, not in duty, but in eyes. Years of service had taught them to remain detached. But detachment only works when moments stay predictable. This one wasn't. Why were people crying? It wasn't tragedy unfolding. There was no announcement of loss. No words spoken aloud. And yet, the emotion was real. Perhaps it was because people sensed resilience. Or maybe they saw a reflection of their own struggles, their own perseverance, walking quietly before them. William paused, just briefly. Not enough to break formation. Just enough to turn slightly toward a cluster of faces near the front. An elderly man stood there, metal pinned to his coat. Their eyes met. No salute, no gesture. Just mutual recognition. That pause less than a second sent a ripple through the crowd. Breaths hitched, hearts raced. It felt as though something important had just been acknowledged without needing explanation. Kate noticed, too. She adjusted her pace, staying perfectly in step with William. Her posture remained poised, but her eyes told a fuller story: empathy, understanding, gratitude. This wasn't about being admired. It was about being connected. A young woman in the crowd whispered, "They're different today." She didn't say it loudly, but the words traveled. Different how? Not dressed differently, not behaving unusually. Different in weight. Every step seemed to carry more than ceremony. It carried shared memory of loss endured, pressure survived, expectations met with quiet courage. As they reached the center of the room, the silence finally cracked, not with cheers, but with sobs, soft, unashamed. A royal guard near the back later admitted he felt his vision blur. He hadn't cried in uniform in his entire career. Yet here he was, staring straight ahead, blinking slowly, fighting a battle no training manual had prepared him for. Stay still, stay composed, do not react. But the heart doesn't always follow orders. William stood tall now, shoulders squared, but not rigid. There was strength there, yes, but also humility. He wasn't absorbing the emotion like fuel. He was sharing it. Kate's hand brushed lightly against his arm. What people would remember wasn't the footage. T was the feeling. Guards adjusted their formation as protocol demanded, but no one missed the shift in atmosphere. The palace no longer felt imposing. It felt approachable. For the first time in a long while, royalty didn't feel distant. It felt close enough to touch emotionally, if not physically. And as William and Kate stood there, facing the crowd, something quietly remarkable settled in. This walk, so simple, so restrained, had done what speeches often fail to do. It reminded people why they care. Why monarchy, at its best, isn't about power, but about presence. And yet, beneath the calm, something else stirred. Because behind the tears, behind the silence, behind the shared understanding, there was a question forming. What did the guard see next that the crowd didn't? From where the royal guard stood, the world looked different. They weren't watching as spectators. They weren't allowed to. Their role was protection, precision, readiness. Eyes trained to scan hands, movement, posture. Minds conditioned to expect the unexpected. And yet, this moment tested them in a way no drill ever had. One guard stationed just off to the left fixed his gaze forward, jaw set tight. He had served during state visits, funerals, celebrations, moments of national joy and deep sorrow. He had stood inches away from history more times than he could count. But this This wasn't history shouting. It was history whispering. As Prince William and Kate stood before the crowd, the guard noticed the smallest details most people would miss. The way William's shoulders relaxed once he realized the crowd wasn't demanding anything from him. The way Kate subtly shifted her weight, grounding herself, staying present. These weren't rehearsed movements. They were instinctive. The guard remembered his briefing from earlier that morning. Clear instructions, standard formation, expected crowd size, no heightened risk indicators, nothing about emotional impact, nothing about composure being tested, not by danger, but by humanity. He swallowed. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of another guard, blinking more than usual. Further down the line, a younger officer stood rigid, breathing measured, fighting something unseen. No one spoke. No one broke formation. But they all felt it. Royal guards are trained to see people at their best and worst. They witness grief at arm's length. They stand watch during moments when the world holds its breath. Over time, emotion becomes background noise. Until suddenly, it doesn't. William turned slightly, addressing a different section of the crowd. His expression was steady, but there was something raw behind it. Not weakness. Vulnerability controlled by purpose. Kate's gaze followed his, attentive, aware. She wasn't scanning faces randomly. She was connecting dots. Who needed reassurance, who needed space, who simply needed to be acknowledged. The guard noticed something else. Then the crowd wasn't leaning forward. They weren't pushing. They were holding back, almost protecting the moment themselves. That's when it hit him. This wasn't a crowd demanding royalty. This was a crowd offering trust. And trust is heavier than expectation. A memory surfaced in the guard's mind, his first day on duty years ago. The instructor's voice had been firm, almost blunt. Never forget, you guard the institution, not the individuals. But standing there now, he wasn't so sure the line was that clear. Because institutions don't feel pressure. People do. William shifted his stance slightly, feet firm, posture strong. He looked every bit the future king, but stripped of distance. Stripped of armor. Kate stood beside him, unwavering. Her calm didn't come from detachment. It came from choice. The guard realized then that what he was witnessing wasn't just unity between two people, but alignment between leadership and the public. A rare thing, a fragile thing, a moment that could not be forced. Behind the guards, palace staff watched quietly. Some had worked here for decades. Some were new. All of them understood that this moment would be talked about long after uniforms changed and schedules moved on. A subtle signal passed through the guard line time to prepare for the next phase. But no one wanted to move yet. The guard's hand tightened briefly against the seam of his glove. Not from fear, from effort, holding it together. He thought about the people in the crowd, the elderly, the young, the ones wiping tears, the ones smiling through emotion they didn't expect to feel. Why did this matter so much? Because people rarely cry when they feel entertained. They cry when they feel understood. William inclined his head slightly. A simple gesture. Respectful, grounded. Kate followed, mirroring him. That synchronized movement, unplanned yet perfectly timed, sent another wave through the space. The guard felt it like a low vibration in his chest. This is what leadership looks like, he thought. Not commanding attention, earning it. As the moment edged closer to transition, the guard noticed something almost unsettling. Kate exhaled slowly, shoulders steady, eyes bright. The guard caught his reflection faintly in the polished surface nearby. For a split second, he didn't see a uniform. He saw a man witnessing something rare. As movement resumed and protocol gently reclaimed control, the emotional weight didn't disappear. It lingered, settling into memory, embedding itself into the walls, the floor, the people. This wasn't a breach of duty. It was a reminder of why duty exists in the first place. And as William and Kate began to step away, the guard understood something that would stay with him long after the crowd dispersed. This moment would be remembered, not because of where it happened, but because of how it made people feel. And yet, as powerful as it was, the true impact of this walk was still unfolding. Because what happened after in the hours and days that followed would quietly change how the public saw the future of the monarchy itself. By the time the crowd began to disperse, something had already shifted. People didn't rush away. They lingered, standing in small groups, speaking in hushed tones, replaying the moment as if saying it out loud might help them understand why it felt so important. William and Kate had already stepped away from public view, but the moment had followed them inside. For William, the walk lingered in his thoughts, not because of applause, there hadn't been any, but because of faces. The elderly man with the medal, the child reaching out, the silence that spoke louder than cheers ever could. That silence told him something. People weren't asking for grandeur. They were asking for authenticity. Kate sensed it too. She had felt it in the way the crowd held itself together, in the way emotion rose without permission. Years of experience had taught her to read rooms, to understand the emotional temperature of a moment, and this one was unmistakable. It was trust. In the hours that followed, clips of the walk began circulating. Not dramatic footage, no sweeping music, just simple, steady images of two people moving together, unguarded in a guarded world. And something unexpected happened. Commentators struggled. There was no scandal to analyze, no controversy to dissect. Even critics found themselves pausing, choosing their words carefully. Experts debated its future in columns and panels, often speaking about the public rather than with them. But this moment cut through all of that. It reminded people that the institution, at its core, is carried by individuals who feel pressure, who endure loss, who choose to show up anyway. Royal historians later pointed to this walk as a turning point, though no one used grand language at the time. They simply noted that something had changed in tone. Less distance, more connection. Royal guards noticed it too in the days that followed. Crowds were calmer. Conversations were warmer. There was less shouting, more listening. People didn't come just to see royalty anymore. They came to feel something. And that's a powerful shift. When asked, she redirected attention to the people who had come, the stories they carried with them. That choice spoke volumes, because leadership isn't about centering yourself. It's about making others feel seen. Weeks later, the memory of that walk still surfaced in conversations. Guards mentioned it quietly among themselves. Staff recalled it with a kind of reverence. Members of the public described it as the day something felt right again. Not perfect, not solved, outgrounded. In a world often dominated by noise, this moment mattered because it chose stillness, because it allowed emotion without demanding performance, because it reminded people that behind every title is a human being, and behind every uniform is a heart that can still be moved. The monarchy didn't change overnight, but the relationship did. And sometimes that's how real change begins, not with declarations or dramatic gestures, but with a simple walk across a room. Two people, one shared moment, and a silence full of meaning. As the palace returned to its routines and the world moved on to the next headline, one truth remained quietly intact. That day at Kensington Palace wasn't remembered for what was said. It was remembered for what was felt.